My issue is that your evidence for Jesus Christ being reliable is completely dependent on the Bible as a source, okay, which has every reason to claim that he's reliable. You don't take any other viewpoints which may take a more balanced view of it.
The evidence that Muhammad is reliable is all wrapped up in the Quran. The evidence that the Buddha is reliable is all wrapped up in the teachings of the Buddha. The evidence that Zoroaster is reliable is all wrapped up in his writings.
Yeah?
That's correct. And the evidence that Jesus Christ is reliable is all wrapped up in the New Testament. That's correct. Whenever I want to find out about a historical person, I always go to the eyewitness source documents. I could care less what Mr. Scorsese says in The Last Temptation of Christ. I could care less what Cecil B. DeMille says in his movies. Those guys lived 2,000 years after Christ. They never met the guy. I am always concerned about eyewitnesses. What does the eyewitness community say really happened, really occurred? I hope you're the same way.
I find that the evidence of one's own senses are the most compelling evidence that one can find. However, you are relying on a several 2,000-year-old works that have been translated, recopied, copied, translated, etc., many, many times by people who have everything to gain by writing it their own way.
The Gospels that we have today are not retranslations of retranslations. The Gospels that we have in English today are based on over 5,000 Greek manuscripts or pieces of manuscript dated from the 1st through the 10th century AD, all agreeing to an infinitesimal degree.
They don't all agree.
They sure do. The manuscript variants are so small and inconsequential, it's absurd. And you get an NIV, and there's a wonderful honesty that John chapter 8, verses 1 through 11, and the end of Mark chapter 16 is not in some of the earliest Greek manuscripts. And that's exciting that we have that kind of brutal honesty and that kind of precision to know what was there in the first manuscripts and what might not have been there. Incredibly high degree of accuracy.
I want to know what evidence in the Bible, and don't base it on the words, but more in terms of what historical significance in the Bible points to Jesus Christ being the Messiah, for example. Not only being the Messiah, but even more importantly, being the sole Son of God, who's given as a gift to mankind. Because the proof, to me there, that is a matter of faith and not of any kind of proof that you can come up with from the Bible. If you manage to show me actual historical proof that Jesus Christ is the Messiah, then I'll convert immediately. But as it is right now, I don't see that there's any way to prove that Jesus Christ was reliable in terms of being the Messiah. There's no way to prove it, especially not through the words of the New Testament, which were written by followers of Christ. And I don't want to call them, I don't want to say that they're being duplicitous, but they are coming from a biased standpoint as followers of Christ.
You got to read the writings of this incredible Jewish man named Saul of Tarsus. Saul of Tarsus killed followers of Jesus. He murdered them. He martyred them. He was there when Stephen was stoned, approving of the stoning. Saul of Tarsus, this incredibly trained, intellectual, objective Jewish man, had an incredible encounter with Jesus Christ on the road to Damascus. And in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, Saul of Tarsus, who changed his name to Paul, writes, "If Jesus Christ is not risen from the dead, we are fools for believing in him. It is because Jesus Christ has risen from the dead, because it's an historical space-time event, that we put our faith in him." In other words, Jesus made a big mistake. Jesus gave us a way to falsify him or to verify him. He said, "I will die and rise from the dead." In other words, faith in Christ is not based on either agreeing or disagreeing with his teachings. Rather, faith in Christ is based on, did he rise from the dead or did he not rise from the dead? And there's a way you can historically verify that. I can't verify whether a guy sitting under a palm tree, foaming at the mouth, is speaking the truth or not. It comes down to, I either believe it or I don't believe it. But you see, Jesus appeals to my intellect by showing very clearly that it's his resurrection from the dead that's the linchpin regarding his veracity or his being a liar.
This is where my central difficulty arises, you see, because Saul of Damascus had this wonderful encounter with Jesus Christ, but that was Saul of Damascus. And Saul of Damascus, or Saul of Tarsus was alone on the road to Damascus, apparently, when he had this encounter. So I have... Oh, did he? Okay, so there's corroborative evidence, but at the same time, I could say that Jimmy Hoffa rose from the dead and is walking around Milwaukee, and there'd be no way to really deny it, except for the fact that me and a few of my friends were walking around Milwaukee, and we saw this guy look just like Jimmy Hoffa, and he said that he'd come back from the dead. Granted, I'm not insane, so you could say that here's a perfectly sane individual making a very weird claim, but you can't really truly deny it. So I can't say that I'm denying the fact of Jesus, because I have no way to prove my point either. But the fact is, the reason I've never been able to accept Jesus Christ as my personal Savior is because the requirement of accepting the words of people who died 2,000 years ago and bringing that into my own daily regimen of activity is so uncertain. It's really even based on someone else's writing, someone's testimony, even when it's based on what someone really said out of the trueness of their heart, it was still only in their heart. You see what I'm saying? Is in the religion that I'm a Jew. As a Jew, I don't have to accept a guy named Jesus Christ. I don't have to accept that these certain things happened. What I accept are prescribed activities that I do in my search for my own spiritual enlightenment. It has nothing to do with speaking to God or seeking audience with God or seeking a relationship with God on a personal basis. Judaism only requires that I believe in God and take the teachings of the Old Testament and the teachings of the Talmud as a guide, as a map, you might say, to finding my own enlightenment. It's almost the same as Buddhism in terms of what you're seeking by being a Jew is not favor with God, but more a connectedness with your own soul. And you're not even seeking a place at God's table, because a place at God's table is guaranteed because of the love God has for humankind. So that you see how with my religion, I'm secure in my belief, because all my belief requires me to do is to search within myself for my spiritual connection, search within myself for my own enlightenment. But saying that it's not a leap of blind faith, and saying that it's not casting out intellectualism or rational thought, that's really false. And that's not to say that it's less respectable, and it's not to say that it's a stupid thing to do, but it is denying rational thought for the sake of faith. And it's not that I'm attacking that in any way, but you can't say that accepting Jesus Christ as your personal Savior is an intellectual pursuit, or even, you're even a rational one. Accepting the idea of love, the concept of love, accepting the concept of friendship, all of these things, none of these are rational concepts either. They're emotional ones. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm afraid I do.
I'm afraid you
I'm
disagree.
scared spitless. Because what I hear you saying is religion is basically any good old fantasy you want to settle for.
Amen. Yeah, in a certain sense.
Religion is any good old fantasy you want to settle for.
That is exactly.
Well, friend, I can promise you, I don't want to live my life based on a fantasy. I, as a thinking human being, realize I can't prove anything in life. I can't prove that I'm standing right here, right now.
Hallelujah.
But the evidence is I'm standing right here, right now. And that's why I behave the way I do. Because I am convinced that although I cannot prove that I'm standing here, the overwhelming evidence is that I'm standing here. I cannot prove that she's sitting here. But right about now, I got to make a decision. Does the evidence point to her sitting here, or does it not? And I can play the little intellectual game of agnosticism and say, I don't know, because I can't prove. I don't know, so I'm just going to create reality in my mind. So I'm going to swing. But right about now, all my little intellectual gymnastics and game playing is over. I have to make a decision. Is she sitting here, or is she not? If she's not sitting here, I can just keep swinging. And my question as a thinking human being is, I know I can't prove that God exists. I know I can't prove Jesus Christ is the truth. I know I can't prove that Muhammad is the truth. But that's okay, because I can't prove that she's sitting here. I base my life on evidence. And the evidence is that God exists, and the historical evidence is that Jesus rose from the dead. And that's why I trust in it.
But that all depends on the kind of evidence you're willing to accept.
That's right. That's exactly right.
And what you're accepting are 2,000-year-old words. Well, Sophocles wrote Antigone, I don't know how many years ago, but I'm not going to believe with 500 years ago? 500 years before Christ. Okay. So Sophocles wrote Antigone, but I'm not entirely ready to assume that story is actually true. And the story of Zeus making love to Io is, corroborated by thousands of ancient Greeks, but I'm not ready to accept it based on their testimony.
Well, sir, I don't assume that anything is true. I am a skeptic, but I'm not going to be a cynic. A cynic refuses to be open to evidence. A skeptic says, I refuse to believe before I've been given evidence. But once I've been given evidence, I'm open to accepting it. So I don't assume anything's true. But I do look for evidence. And once the evidence points in a certain direction, I follow where the evidence leads. That's what we're all about in a university environment.
I'm citing your own evidence, however. Your evidence, or the evidence that you're citing, are the writings of other people who lived a very long time ago and were said to experience these things firsthand. Correct?
No. When you read Greek mythology, the literary style is clearly mythology. It is not an historical claim. And for you to try and compare the Greek myths with the Quran is so intellectually dishonest, it's scary. The Quran presents an historical person, Muhammad, who really lived. That's clearly historical evidence. The Greek myths are not talking about an historical person who really lived. They're the literary style of mythology. And if you want to stand out here and tell me that Muhammad was a myth created by the Arab people, I'm going to tell you that you have been blinded by your own bias, because the historical evidence is that Muhammad really did live and really did a lot in his life and really died.
No, I agree.
There is a difference between historical narrative and mythology.
This is true. And I agree that the historical evidence points to the existence of Muhammad, and this is why I accept the existence of Christ.
What's the historical evidence that you accept that shows you that Jesus really lived?
Well, to me, the Bible is evidence.
Oh, really?
Jesus lived. But
Oh, why would you trust this bigoted Bible as your primary source of information that Jesus existed? Come on, guys. It was all written by believers. So why would you believe this biased book, the Bible, to be your basis for believing that Jesus really existed? Come on, buddy, think with me.
He's giving you a generous presumption by saying he's willing to accept the historical.
I'm not interested in his charity. I'm not interested in his condescending patronizing of me. I don't buy it, okay? I want hard thinking. If you're going to tell me that you believe Jesus was a real space-time person, I want to know why. And you told me, because the Bible says so. Well, why would you trust the Bible to give you accurate historical information? What you guys are arguing is life comes from non-life. Never once in my experience have I ever seen life come from non-life.
Well, you
100 times out of 100. I don't care if it's a tree. I don't care if it's a rabbit. I don't care if it's an alligator. I don't care if it's a human being.
Well,
life comes from life. What you guys are asking me to believe is life comes from non-life. Never once have I seen that validated. Never once.
You're asserting something sacred to the term life. Life is
Fine.
nothing
My
but
point is
a
simple.
reaction.
So here we go. Here's your argument. Your argument is, well, it's never happened, but it could. You're right. It could. But guess what, guys? I have to base my life on the evidence I have. I cannot base my life on evidence I don't have. Therefore, the only evidence I have is life comes from life. I have no evidence that life comes from non-life. Now, what you guys are asking me to believe is, well, Cliff, you haven't experienced everything. You're correct. I've not experienced everything. But I am not going to base my life on the theoretical idea. Well, I'm going to base my life on something I've never seen, never heard of, never experienced. But it could be. Therefore, I'm going to base my life on it. That is such blind faith. That is such blind faith. I am too much of a skeptic to buy into that. I will base my life on evidence that I have. I will not base my life on evidence I don't have.
Inductive evidence does not
There's no way possible to calculate it. How can you base your beliefs on something that can't even be calculated? I mean, at least life coming out of non-life can be calculated, and there is a small chance for it. There's no way to calculate the chance for creationism.
That's not true. All around you every day, creativity is expressed by a rational thinking mind. And when you see an incredible piece of artwork, you know that there's an amazingly creative artist behind it. And you see it happen all around. The explosive creativity of human beings is expressed in a myriad of different ways that you appreciate and enjoy, and so do I. And so all I'm saying is, when you see the explosive creativity of the human body, the human mind, is it more plausible to believe that that's an accident, or is it more plausible to believe that there's an intelligent mind behind it? Some type of God.
I don't think the human body is that creative. I mean, we have a lot of imperfections. I mean, we can't. I mean, for example, we have to eat. We have to, we have to use the restroom. We have a lot of stuff. If we were perfect beings, we'd really just, have to do none of this stuff.
Guess what, sir? If you don't use the restroom,
I know.
I'm concerned for you because there's a breakdown. I have a good friend who just had his intestines, 8 inches of his intestines taken out. I can promise you the example you just gave is a wonderful example of the amazing intricacy of the human body. Our ability to eat food, digest it, and discard waste, and continue on. I sure hope that your digestive system does not break down. That digestive system that you have is incredibly fine. It's amazingly intricate. Every time you look at the human body that's operating in a healthy way, you're bowled over by the amazing design and creativity there. Just think about the expense of that camera right there. Compare that camera to your eye. There's no comparison. Your eye is so much more intricate than that camera. I mean, it's incredible. Now, if you demand that I believe that there's a mechanic behind that camera, and then you tell me that there's an accident behind this eye, I find that so irrational, so highly implausible. It's pathetic. Come on.
Yes, human minds have a tendency to arrange inorganic things into inorganic systems of greater beauty. It seems an equally incredible leap to say that, therefore, when you see complex patterns of life, it must have been put there by something of comparable intelligence.
Okay. I agree with you. I agree with you. Obviously, there is a leap there. No question about it. Obviously, no, it's not huge. It's much smaller than the leap that the atheist takes. Much smaller. It's an issue of, here's the issue. What is most plausible? Not what can you prove. The issue is what is most plausible? What is most reasonable to believe in light of the evidence?
Well, in light of the evidence, I have seen chemical reactions that create systems of greater complexity, which could be extrapolated to the creation of life. I have never seen God create a single atom. I have never seen God create a thing. I've never seen God add 1 plus 1. So I would say the evidence is immensely in favor of an inorganic origin for life.
Well, where is the evidence that life comes from non-life? That the organic comes from the inorganic?
Give me a week at a chemistry lab and I can make you some amino acids. From amino acids you can make proteins. From proteins you can make life.
Now, that's exactly what I believe. You, an intelligent mind, can make life. That's exactly right. That's exactly what I'm saying. Notice what you said. Give me a week and some chemicals, and I'll put it together in such a way. That's exactly what I'm saying. Intelligent mind, God takes matter and energy, creates life.
Whatever just the basic. Just a planet in a billion years. None of my interference. Some lightning, some methane, some water, some heat from internal reactions and from the sun. That's exactly what I replicated in the lab. And over a billion years, that planet, without any of my interference, is going to make those same amino acids. Those amino acids are going to make proteins. Those proteins are going to come together and make life. That's exactly what happened. What I do is replicate on a small scale what nature can do without any invention, all by its own self. Exactly.
I admire your blind faith. I could never have that kind of blind faith.
You think it's blind faith to think that an entire planet with immensely complex dynamic systems can do something far more complex without an intelligent mind behind it than what I can do with the resources of a few bucks in a chemistry lab?
What I'm saying is, inanimate matter can't do a thing. It's inanimate. And your whole argument is, this is what inanimate matter can do.
That's this ring. We didn't have a ringer do it. We had a machine doing it on time.
And you don't think there's an intelligent mind behind that bell tower?
Oh, I think there was an intelligent mind behind that bell tower.
You don't think there's someone who's programmed that bell to ring at a certain time? You just think that happened by accident?
Wind could blow it.
The wind could blow it.
Lots of things. This is an entire planet.
You guys are having to dig
Bizarre
pretty deep to get yourself out of this one. Good gracious.
This is an entire.
Yeah, the wind could blow a bell. That's true.
Processes. It can do any number of things. I look at Yellowstone and I don't think, man, that's gorgeous. They must have hired a whole army of painters to do that. No. Yellowstone is there because the natural processes of evolution and forest growth, and recently a forest fire, made it what it is today.
Fine.
Without any intelligent intervention. And that's what's amazing.
I agree with that.
That something that complex exists without having been made by a human.
Forest fires occur, erosion occurs, there are tornadoes, there are earthquakes, geological formations change. That's not the issue. Is it more plausible to believe that there's just chance and fate, or is it more plausible to believe that there's an intelligent mind? That's the issue. We agree scientifically. This is how the process works. The philosophical question is, behind the process that we study scientifically, is there an intelligent mind or is there no intelligent mind? And I'm saying, come on guys, that's a no-brainer. You know that order and design come from an intelligent mind. I'm not debating evolution, I'm debating philosophy. Is it more plausible to believe that behind this wonderful process there's an intelligent mind, or is it more reasonable to believe that behind the process there's no intelligent mind? Yes?
Suppose I accept the existence of an intelligent creator. Why then should I believe that that's the Christian God?
Great question. Suppose that I believe there is some type of intelligent creator. Why should I believe it's Jesus Christ? Great question. Well, once you and I agree that there's some type of God, we hit a brick wall. And the brick wall is, I'm not smart enough to figure out the intelligent creator, and I don't think you're smart enough to figure out the intelligent creator. But that shouldn't frustrate us, because I'm not smart enough to figure you out. And you're not smart enough to figure me out. It's like this. Hi, my name's Cliff. What's your name? Harriet? Anne. Okay, that's being rude. I'm being rude, aren't I? The name is Michael, isn't it? If in my arrogance, I say, no, it's Harriet. No, it's Anne. I'm an arrogant idiot. I have to have the humility to allow Michael to be Michael. And there's only one way I'm going to get to know Michael. And that is if Michael opens up and reveals Michael's name, Michael's character, Michael's personality. And the same thing is true with God. I have to have the humility to allow God to open up, to reveal who God is, what God's character is like. Now that's where Muhammad, Confucius, Jesus, the prophets of Israel, Shirley MacLaine, Joseph Smith come into the picture. They all claim that God has spoken through them. Now they contradict each other, so they can't all be speaking the truth. Maybe they're all lying, but they can't all be speaking the truth because they contradict each other. So the question becomes, what is the evidence pointing to the reliability of any of them? And when you read the Gospels and read about Jesus' lifestyle, his teachings, his death, and his resurrection, there you have evidence that he is reliable in a way that none of the options are. The grave of Muhammad is filled, and I respect Muhammad, but his grave is full. The grave of Confucius is full, and I respect Confucius. He was a very wise man. But the grave of Jesus Christ is empty. His resurrection from the dead sets him apart as unique. So that's why I trust Jesus to reveal God accurately.
How do you put your whole foundation for existence in something that was handed down and interpreted by a human being in oral literature? Why do we find walking on water, virgin births, and resurrections from the dead in mythological literature that predates the Gospels and the Greek and Roman mystery religions? There you go.
Wouldn't it be
Explain that one to me, bud.
Well, wouldn't a better defense of Christian philosophy be that it follows the law of, Kant's law of non-contradiction and it's rational rather than basing it upon miracles?
He's not bringing up anything. We're using his technique we learned from the best.
Yeah, let's just keep interrupting and not let him say anything. Okay. No, go on.
Go on.
When I was in college, professors used the Gilgamesh epic to debunk the flood account in Genesis of Noah. The professor never had the open-mindedness to consider the possibility that indeed there might have been a great flood. And different cultures might have had to struggle through, hey, how are we going to communicate that there really was a great flood. Obviously, there might have been a great flood, and different cultures sought to communicate that cataclysmic event. And that's why we have the Gilgamesh epic that we study in humanities. And that's why we have the flood account in Genesis and Noah. To conclude that because there are different stories in different cultures about different issues, be it a flood, be it whatever, to conclude that it's all erroneous because different cultures communicated differently, I find very twisted thinking.
You believe that God is the questions weren't about great floods, John.
That's not the question. We're not asking about
Nazi literature for World War II. Have you ever heard what they said that the Americans were doing to German prisoners? Have you ever read what they said that the Americans were really wanting to do to Germany? Read that and understand what a warped, twisted perspective people can come from. Sure, they may have had a strange way of thinking. They may have been, to us that seems very wrong, but to them at the time, they were very right to themselves. Now, it seems to me, granted, Bible is not as bad as the Nazis. I fully grant you that. That was some pretty warped crap right there. But when you come down to it, you're looking at a warped version of the truth. How can you believe in something that is so warped away from the truth that you never knew what the real truth was?
Right. Now, I hope that you'll really think about what you just said, because what you just said is a violent contradiction to your worldview. What you just said was, gosh, can you believe what the Nazis thought Americans were doing to German prisoners? Like, can you believe the Nazis really believed that? You see, your indignation shows very clearly that you do believe that historical truth exists, and that historical truth was perverted by those Nazis. So you're not a total cynic when it comes to history. You know that we can know something historically, and you know that those Nazi records of how the German prisoners were persecuted by the Americans is garbage. Total garbage. You see, you can't live out your relativism consistently. You quietly assume that you know what's right. You quietly assume that you know the Nazis were wrong with their propaganda. You see, you can't live out your relativism, sir. You consistently, quietly assume, hey, you know something? I really do know what's true. I really do know that it was the Nazis who gassed those Jews. I really do know that those Nazis were inferior and the Allies were superior. Do you see how you cannot live out your relativism?
The only reason they were superior is because they won the war.
Really?
If the Germans had won the war, they would have been considered superior now.
Oh, really? So if the Nazis would have won the war, you'd have considered them to be right?
Because I would have been brought up that way.
Oh, because you'd have been brought up that way. Like all of the students at the University of Texas who were brought up going to church, believe in God and believe in Jesus. Like you guys don't have free will, do you? You're just a slave of mom and dad. You just believe what mom and dad taught you. You poor little guys, you're just the result of your environment. Come on, guys, wake up and smell the coffee. You got a free will, and you know your free will puts you in a position where you don't have to believe what mom and dad taught you. You can totally reject what mom and dad taught you. And I have the utmost respect for two white women, the Grimke sisters, who grew up on a plantation in South Carolina. And they were taught what made the economic well-being of their plantation go round and round. It was having black slaves. But Sarah and Angelina Grimke had a conscience, and their conscience informed them that slavery was wrong. And that's why they left that plantation in South Carolina and followed their conscience instead of the status quo. Okay, so you understand that the avatars of Hinduism are making truth claims. Siddhartha Gautama Buddha is making truth claims. Jesus Christ is making truth claims. Muhammad made truth claims. They contradict.
Right, but
there are
I'd
similarities, but there are a lot of contradictions.
Yeah, well, I'd rather believe Siddhartha Gautama.
Okay, good.
Right,
and also Jesus. Why? Why would you trust Siddhartha Gautama Buddha instead of Jesus?
You know, look at Buddhism. Buddhism doesn't have all that crazy dogma that Christianity has. Buddha, I mean, there's it's, to me, like that kind of religion is more about how do you live life properly. You know, and it doesn't have the dogma, so I would just say I would pick that over Jesus. But
Okay.
what I believe is that people are indoctrinated, and like I luckily didn't have much religious education. I was brought up Catholic, but I didn't have a lot of, I didn't go to mass. I went to mass twice. I went to Sunday school one summer, and that's it. But I grew up with a lot of other people that are obviously very smart, but they're screwed because they're indoctrinated from a very young age. The fear is put into you, and it's insane. Like, go around this city, right? And where do people put their kids in schools? Well, schools are bad anyway, no matter what kind of school it is. But Christian schools, and then after Christian school, it's Christian daycare, and so this indoctrination is going on nonstop.
All right, I'm sorry that you have been exposed to a Christianity that majors on fear.
It
I can promise you,
is.
no, sir.
That's the basis of it.
No, sir. False. The best reason to believe in Jesus Christ is because he's the truth. That's the best reason to believe in Christ, because he's the truth, which means he's credible. He's faithful.
By saying that he's the truth, but I have to stop you there. Like, why would you say he's the truth instead of like
I didn't
Jim
say
or
that. You see, you're not
Paul
listening to me, sir. I didn't say that. I said the best reason to believe in him is because he's the truth.
I know, but that's an
If he's not the
incredible
truth,
claim.
then don't believe in him. But if he is the truth, believe him. If he's not the truth, do not believe in him because of fear.
It's an absolutely incredible claim to say that he's the truth. This
Right.
is what. This
But
is
you made
what
the
I
same
don't-
claim for Siddhartha Gautama Buddha, that he's the truth. And that
Not
he spoke
that he's
the
the
truth.
but more that he spoke the truth about
All
our
right,
condition.
fine. So they're both making
But
truth claims.
what I'm saying, I'm evaluating intellectually what he said versus evaluating intellectually, Jesus and the claims that he's God. And
All right. So, study Siddhartha Gautama Buddha.
I read Hermann Hesse. I've read a lot. I know a lot about.
That's
Buddha.
not the teachings of Buddha. Read go to the source document.
I've
teachings
read
of
the
Siddhartha
Diamond
Gautama
Sutra.
Buddha.
I've read like source documents of Buddha.
All right, well then you know that Buddha never talked once about God. I am convinced the evidence is God exists. Jesus Christ did talk about God and about how to know God. Secondly, think about karma that Buddha did talk about. Explore grace that Jesus talked about. The grace of God, the forgiveness, the generosity, the unmerited love of God. Put your faith in Christ because the evidence is he's the truth and because he really loves you, not because of fear. And I'd encourage you to seriously consider that Siddhartha Gautama Buddha, although he taught a lot of good things about suffering, really missed the boat when it comes to the solution for suffering, which he said was to cut off your desires. If you literally cut off all your desires, you are in a mess. I hope you have a desire to love.
I don't think you understand.
I hope you have a desire.
That's a subtle teaching about. The thing is, if you're able to let go of desires, you're able to enter into a cosmic consciousness kind of state. And
what does that mean? A cosmic consciousness state?
I mean, you're free from desire, but I think there's a subtlety. You're not free. It doesn't mean that you don't have desires. It's just that you're free from attachments. That's more to the point. Is that?
Well, I hope you learn to make attachments and commitments. I hope you learn to connect with people and to connect with God.
Screwed. Attachments are what bind our consciousness to. It's hard to explain. But I'll leave you with one
it's
thing.
real hard to explain.
I know you want to talk to somebody else, but I'll leave you with one thing, which I always thought a powerful. You're saying you started like this recent thing saying that you believe in God, right? But I always thought that a strong argument against the existence of God is like, look at all the evil in the world. As we are here right now, we're on the precipice of a revolution. The world's falling apart. Now Russia has come in. The Third World War has already started. Russia has come into Syria. And we basically, what they warned us about throughout the 20th century now is a possible reality. You could have thousands of hydrogen bombs go off, and as Alan Watts says, our faulty philosophy about who we are leads man inexorably to destroy himself in what he, that's coming, that could come true. I'm not saying, I hope it doesn't, but so the question is why would God allow, because he's there, hello, why would he allow that to go on?
Because he chose to limit his power by giving us a free will. And I can promise you, God isn't pulling triggers on machine guns to slaughter babies. Human beings are. That's why there's going to be a day of judgment when God judges those human beings for the evil that they perpetrated. And that's why Jesus died on a cross, because evil is real, and the penalty for evil is death and hell, and Christ took that penalty on the cross to forgive us.
All right.
Take care, my man.
Thank you very
After
much.
20 years, good to see you again.
You too.
Do you believe that Islam has the same God as Christians do?
No.
Why?
Because in the Quran, Muhammad consistently says Jesus is not God. I, as a follower of Christ, worship Jesus as God.
But in the Bible, nowhere does it say that Jesus is God unless you interpret John 1:1 and John 1:14, where it says the Word became flesh, in the beginning was the Word was God, and the Word was with God. But Jesus never said blatantly, I am God. That's why it's like the messianic secret, right? And when God like talked to Jesus, he said like, this is my son who I am with well pleased. So he's the son of God in the Bible, and that's all he's over portrayed as, even in his death as centurion when he said, this man was surely the son of God. And so where in the Bible does it say Jesus is God? Excluding John 1:1 and John 1:14.
In John 8:58, Jesus says, before Abraham was born, I am. The Jews did not call God G-O-D. They called him Yahweh, Jehovah, which is the Hebrew verb to be. I am who I am. Very deliberately in John 8:58, Jesus says, before Abraham was born, I am. No misunderstanding among the Jews. They understand it as the sin of blasphemy. That he, a mere man, would have the audacity to claim to be God in human form is unacceptable. John chapter 10, verse 30, Jesus says, I and the Father are one. Once again, no misunderstanding. The Jews pick up stones to stone him for blasphemy. After his resurrection, the disciples say to Thomas, we saw Jesus risen from the dead. And Thomas says, I'm sorry, not unless I can see him with my own eyes, not unless I can take my hand and put them in the nail prints in his hands, will I believe. One night, Jesus stands right in front of Thomas and says, right here, my man, take your hands and put them in the nail prints in my hands. Take your hand and thrust it in a spear wound in my side. And Thomas stopped doubting and believed. Thomas hits the floor and says, my Lord and my God. And Jesus says, you believe because you've seen. Blessed are those who will believe even though they've not seen.
Okay, but an argument to that. So what about when in I think it was Matthew and Mark where he says, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why would Jesus, if he is God, right?
Right.
Tell God, why have you forsaken me? I mean,
You bet.
It makes more sense if he was the son of God telling God, hey God, why do I have to suffer? Why do I have to have this pain?
Mm-hmm. You're getting at a very difficult, good issue, which is the incarnation. How God became a human being. That's a mystery. I can't explain exactly how God becomes a human being. But what is crystal clear from the New Testament is Jesus was totally a human being. He was tempted. He suffered. When they nailed him to the cross, those nails went through flesh, bone, blood, nerve ending. And he really died on that cross. But also he claimed to be more than a man. He claimed to be God in human form.
But Jesus never claimed to be God in human form.
Absolutely. He claimed to be human, and he also claimed to be God.
But
God in human form.
But throughout the gospel, it says that he is the Son of God.
Yeah, God the Son.
Yes.
That's right. But he's also, by calling himself the Son of God, he's claiming to be God.
Okay. So do you believe that Christians that don't believe in the Trinity, and the ones that do you believe in the Trinity, at the end of the day, do you think that it really matters?
Yes, it matters. Because if I deny the deity of Christ, I am denying Christ.
But how are you denying the deity of Christ if you're still saying he's the Son of God?
Well, if you mean he's God in human form, good, you're agreeing with him. But if by saying he's the Son of God, you're saying he's just like this fella and this fella, we're all sons of God, then you're denying his unique claim to be God in human form.
But you're using the gospel hypothetically if you say he is the Son of God. Throughout the Gospels it says he is the Son of God.
Okay, ma'am, it comes down to this. I got a real problem with my believing that God is or Jesus is a 6 foot 1 inch white male. See, that's creating God according to my likes, my prejudices. The challenge for me in getting to know a person is to allow the person to be unique, to be you, and not to recreate you according to what I would like you to be. Same thing true with God. I can't create God in my own likeness according to my own dictates, my own prejudices, my own biases. If I'm going to get to know God, I got to have the humility to allow God to be God. And if God reveals himself by becoming a man in Jesus, I've got to accept that. If he's not reliable, then I'd be a fool to put my faith in Christ.
Cool. Okay. So going back to the issue of like having the same gods or not, so do you think Judaism and Christianity have the same God?
No. Judaism and Christianity do not have the same God because Jesus claimed to be God. Now, Jewish people who accept Christ as God, yes, they're followers of Christ.
But Jesus was a Jew himself.
That's right. I worship a Jew. That's why anti-Semitism is not an option for me.
Okay. But, so this is just all hypothetical stuff. But so Jesus was Jewish.
Yep.
Okay. And so he worshiped God. He went to synagogue and worshiped God. And Jewish people today go to synagogue and they worship God. So who is to say that they don't worship the same God that Christians do?
Because Jesus revealed that God is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and he is the Son. So if I reject Jesus, the one I'm in essence rejecting is God.
Okay. So I have like another question for you, I guess. Like, let's say like there's like a group of Indians on a mountain, just putting something like randomly out there, and they just say someone created all of this, and they didn't say, oh, like that was Jesus. They said God made this.
Right.
Do you believe that those Indians would go to heaven?
First point is, none of us can work our way to heaven by being good. Because I'm not good as God defines good.
But it's faith and belief. If they believe that God made that, do you think they would go to heaven?
Because I've done wrong, and because I'm convinced that all of us have consciences that convict us that we've done wrong, we are all in desperate need of God's grace. So Jesus bled and died on a cross, he claimed, to pay the penalty for our wrongdoing, to offer us forgiveness. Now, if I reject God's forgiveness, I have to pay the penalty for my own decision to do wrong. Are there going to be people in heaven who never had the opportunity to hear the words Jesus Christ? Definitely yes, the Bible insists that. In fact, there's a partial list of those folks in Hebrews chapter 11. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, Rahab, a Gentile prostitute, never heard the word Jesus, but in humility, they put their faith in God. They'll be in heaven, not because they lived good lives, but because they threw themselves upon God for salvation. They trusted him.
But in the same way, could Islam or could Judaism believe in God in like the same way that like, because we believe that we believe in like God, but who's to say that God is not Allah or Yahweh? Like, who is to say like all of that is not the same God?
And who is to say that God is not a 6 foot 1 inch white male? Who's going to be so arrogant that you're going to tell me that the God I believe in, who is a 6 foot 1 inch white male, is not true? You see your thinking? If you follow your thinking, you're in real trouble.
Wait, repeat what you're saying. I don't understand what you're trying to say.
Well, you're telling me, who is anybody to say that Jesus is God and not somebody else? Ma'am, Jesus made a truth claim. And his truth claim is God is not a 6 foot 1 inch white male. I don't care what Cliffe says. Jesus said God is spirit. He's Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And Jesus claimed to be God in human form. Now, he's either an arrogant twit blowing smoke or he's speaking the truth.
Agreed. And so, no, like, I agree. Like, I'm Christian. I believe Jesus is God. But I'm just saying, for those that are other religions, but they really believe in God, who's to say that that God is not the same God as ours?
Well, just listen to what they believe about God. And if they say that God is the tree, No, God is not the tree.
But
Pantheism contradicts Christ. Pantheism teaches that nature is God. And Jesus and the Bible say, no, nature is not God. Nature is a part of God's beautiful creation, but it's not God. So if I worship the tree, if I worship the sun, that's idolatry. I'm worshiping a false God. And if I worship a 6'1" white male, that's also idolatry, because I'm not God.
But couldn't you say that, like, Islam is worshiping God the Father, but maybe not worshiping God the Son or accepting God the Son?
You can say anything you want, right? But obviously Islam contradicts the Trinity that Christ taught, that there's Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Okay. So you believe that if anyone that does not, like, if they just believe solely in God the Father, then they're just not going to. I mean, that's pretty much what you're saying.
Jesus said, come to me. Jesus said, come to me. Jesus Christ. He claimed to be God, revealing himself most clearly. And the dude was either out of touch with reality, or he was speaking the truth. Thank you so much for raising those issues.
Well, you claim that there's a lot of, let's say, scientific, or not necessarily scientific, but there's a lot of valid evidence.
Historical
evidence for the life of Jesus.
Right.
Just as there is a lot of historical evidence for the life of Muhammad.
Correct.
Now, on those two fundamental points, who are we going to believe is the higher truth?
All you got to do is go to the source documents and study them. You've got to figure out, how did Muhammad treat people? How many wives?
Okay.
Was he a man of the sword? You got to read the Gospels. How did Jesus treat women? How many wives? What did he do with a sword? Did he really die a sacrificial death, forgiving his enemies? Did he really rise from the dead? Sir, if Jesus Christ rose from the dead, come on guys, it's a no-brainer. He's reliable. In a way that Confucius, Muhammad, Zoroaster is not reliable, or Shirley MacLaine. Look at Jesus Christ. Examine the evidence from the Gospels. Go to the Quran. Read about Muhammad. How did he live? How did he treat people? How did he handle his enemies? And you got to make your own decision. You cannot take it from me.
Just as someone who can account or witness, let's say, the death and revival of Jesus, right? There's also accounts that say Muhammad going into heaven and asking about the 5 pillars of Islam.
Good.
If a guy goes to heaven and comes back, I think he's pretty reliable.
Okay.
Just as a guy who goes to death and comes back probably seems kind of reliable. What I don't think is reliable is the people who say they saw all of this. So when I study the Bible, which translations should I focus on? The King James Version? Because the Quran has only ever been written in Arabic since the very beginning. That's not true for Christianity, or for the Bible, to be more specific. We have never seen the original Bible. Because if we're basing if we're basing what's right and what's wrong off the teachings of the Bible or the Quran, then it's not necessarily right to impose my own cultural beliefs or what's right and wrong as my method of processing.
Very good. I agree.
Which one's valid?
You bet.
That's circular logic.
You bet.
So, of course, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Hence, any assertion that matter came from something inanimate requires extraordinary evidence.
No, I disagree. I'm going to be consistent. You're inconsistent. I say no. Evidence is evidence. And if the evidence is that God exists, I'm going to follow the evidence. I don't need extraordinary evidence. That's where we disagree.
But why?
Why? Because you're being inconsistent.
No. Why do you not require extraordinary evidence? I mean, this is like religion aside. Like, if I'm going to claim that I'm the most amazing person in the world, I want evidence for that. But...
And as a consistent thinker, I'm going to demand evidence before I believe anything, but I'm not going to demand extraordinary evidence. I'm going to be consistent and demand evidence.
But it's proportional to the claim. I can say I'm the most amazing person in the world and then show I got a B+ in an essay. Like, that is evidence. It's decent, but it's not amazing. Or I could say I got 1 A+ once. That's still proportional to the evidence in the claim. You know, it has to. I mean,
No.
What's enough evidence?
I'm gonna follow you around. And if you tell me you're an outstanding person, all I got to do is follow you around for a week, and I'll be able to tell whether you're an outstanding person or not. I'll have more than enough evidence that you really are incredible, or that, no, you're very normal.
Okay, that was just an example. I'm a pretty shitty guy. But no, yeah. But I still don't quite see. Case in point, and if I don't ignore me, use any other example, I don't quite see how it.
I disagree with changing the goalposts when it comes to evidence. I am not going to say, Muhammad, in order for me to trust you, when you say that you reveal God accurately, you have to give me some extraordinary evidence. No, I'm just going to look at his life, his teachings, his death, what happened after his death. I'm going to do the same thing with Siddhartha Gautama Buddha. I'm going to do the same thing with the avatars of Hinduism, and I'm going to do the same thing with Jesus Christ.
But there's a lot more room for error there. You're comparing, say, a historical document to me pointing at a seed and saying extraordinarily that this seed is going to grow into a tree. Now, that claim, with no context, requires extraordinary evidence. I have no idea if that seed is going to become a tree. What do I need? I need 1,000 trees, 1,000 seeds that can demonstrate without any doubt that that seed will become a tree. You can't then compare that to a historical document with all the problems that's associated with. That's not a fair comparison, if I may.
The reason I think you're being inconsistent is because you've had a delight. I've enjoyed your dialogue with you.
Likewise.
Okay? So I thank you for the way you've talked with me so respectfully, and it's been a delight. Do I have a lot of evidence that you're a great guy? No. No. I can't live my life as a hyper-skeptic. It doesn't work. If I have this changing goalposts of, oh gosh, for him I gotta need more evidence, for him less evidence, for her more evidence, no, that doesn't work. I gotta be consistent and say, all right, if you give me enough evidence that you're respectful and that you're treating me with some kind of dignity, although I don't know you, I'm going to trust you a little bit. And as we go on in our relationship, I'll trust you more and more. And that's the way I'll treat everybody.
So extraordinary evidence. I'll give you just a little bit more. Out of Duke, there are large studies coming out. Dr. Bruce is kind of the expert out of Duke on NDE, near-death experiences. Over 300 peer-reviewed articles in scientific and psychological journals have corroborated on near-death experiences having occurred, such as one man had an experience where he was outside of his body. Typically, this is how it goes, right? Outside of his body, and he knew what was going on down the hall. The nurses corroborated with that evidence and said, yes, that did occur. He actually read the numbers off of a sheet of paper and knew what was going on in that room. So 300 peer-reviewed in scientific and psychological journals. Then there was another huge study done across Europe, India, and the US. 30 million, at least, people stated that they have had NDEs, near-death experiences themselves. I never would have talked about NDEs last year, the year before that. I thought it was a total joke. I think the science and this extraordinary evidence is so strong now that we at least have to dip our toes into it. I also went over to Haiti after the earthquake in 2010. I definitely saw some miraculous experiences and what was going on spiritually. My brother has spent time in Africa. He has noticed some of the supernatural experiences going on down there. So I think you and I in the West, we need to get out a little bit more, out of our little microcosm, out of our little bubble. And it's hard to do so because we're stuck so much in our materialism and technology and scientific mindset. But when we do get out, then some of the evidence does become more apparent.
If I may, I only brought up extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence in the context of this specific scenario whereby if enough evidence was showing that inanimate matter could become animate matter, you asked me what my requirements would be, or what your requirements would be to accept that. And I merely replied that that would require extraordinary evidence. So that was how we initiated this conversation, because I think you disagree. You think it just requires evidence.
What's extraordinary evidence within that context? Because it sounds like a vacuum to me.
Sure. So in the same context of evolution, I mean that is quite the claim to suggest that we came from a few cells in the water. I mean that is a colossal claim, and yet the fossil record has shown, without a doubt, the correlation between species and the development with the planet. So that is an enormous record, which hasn't built up any exceptions to that theory. So that's the sort of obviously scale of evidence that would be required in the equivalent context of inanimate matter becoming animate matter. That's what I'm suggesting.
Jesus being raised from the dead? Is that what you're talking about? What's the reference to the documentation?
That's the fossil record.
Yeah, the fossil record. But I'm still. Are you catching the point? I'm missing the point on the supernatural evidence that he needs when it comes to early manuscripts, or I'm not following that point.
I'm not talking about manuscripts or.
What's the supernatural evidence that you need?
I didn't say supernatural. I said extraordinary evidence.
Extraordinary evidence that you need, because no, I know atheists make this point. Matt Dillahunty and others talk about extraordinary evidence.
Can I also point out that
that's why I brought
at
up
no point
NDEs,
have I said I am an atheist.
Okay. No, but I'm just saying atheists make this very point you're making. But you're applying it very specifically. I've never heard it done this way. To what exactly?
So the context of the conversation we were having before was about why we accept, or why you would accept evolution to explain how God developed life on this planet, and that you would turn to science to explain that, but you turn to religion to explain its origin and its conception, and as a result, you can't possibly accept that we came from, some slime. That's the position you've posited. So my argument is, or my suggestion, or my question is, if evidence did suggest, overwhelming evidence did suggest, that we did indeed come from not just slime, but a bit of rock. I don't know how it would work, I'm not a scientist. To a degree that actually rivaled the fossil record, which is how we justify and explain evolution, would you then have to accept that? And what would be the ramifications for your theological positions?
It's very, very simple. I do not think the fossil record is complete in showing that we come from a single-cell organism. If you're out here arguing that the fossil record is so conclusive that we come from a single-cell organism, I would strongly disagree. There are so many gaps in the fossil record, it's incredible. Now, if those gaps are filled, then sure, I'll believe that we came from a single-cell organism. But that still doesn't answer the question, is there an intelligent mind behind it or not?
That's a different question.
That's a philosophical question, which is different.
You said only a few moments ago that you turn to evolution to understand the way in which God has worked. And yet at the same time, you're now questioning the very evidence that underpins that scientific consensus. So I don't understand which position you hold. Do you either...
Real simple. I accept evolution as a process, not as an origin.
Oh, sure, but how can you accept evolution as a process if you've just identified that, in your view, the fossil record is insufficient?
Because microevolution can be shown to be true in a lab and on a breeding farm.
So what's macroevolution?
Microevolution is within species. Macroevolution is crossing special lines. I see very little evidence that I can breed a horse to the point where it becomes a pig. Can't do it. But there's a lot of evidence that Darwin showed that by breeding carefully, you can turn an ugly pigeon into a finely feathered pigeon. So I accept microevolution. It can be shown.
If I may, that's just false information. As in, there is a huge amount of evidence demonstrating the link to the dinosaurs, and you can trace the genealogy very clearly. Like, that is not something that has gaps. And I don't quite understand.
Yes, there are gaps. You can't show a consistent progression in fossil record from single-cell organism to you today. That does not exist, sir.
Well, mainly because single cells don't have fossils. But I mean, beyond that, the record that is there is overwhelming.
No, it's not.
I mean, okay, I don't want to go into a discussion about evolution because I kind of thought we'd already dealt with this problem.
Yeah, there's no creative mechanism. The second point is there's no creative mechanism in evolution. That's why evolution as an origin is a fantasy, because there is no creative mechanism in evolution.
Evolution doesn't explain the origin. It never claims to.
Oh, it has no creative mechanism.
Sure, but that's...
It has lots of adaptation, but it has no creative mechanism.
But it never claims to.
Oh, there are many evolutionists that claim.
But even the word evolution requires something to move from A to B. It doesn't explain A. I mean, I don't quite understand what you're suggesting here. Evolution, by definition, requires transition. It doesn't explain a point of creation. Evolution never purports to explain creation.
Richard Dawkins and many Americans who hold to evolution insist that evolution explains everything in terms of life. And there is no evidence that anybody can show me that there's a creative mechanism in evolution. It does not exist.
So I refuse to accept that anyone argues realistically that evolution explains creation, mainly because, as I just pointed out, it literally makes no sense. Evolution is an evolutionary process.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, okay, but that's not what I'm arguing here. I'm not claiming evolution explains creation. The hypothetical question that I've been repeating is, if a theory had enough evidence as evolution to substantiate a transition from inanimate to animate matter, what ramifications would that have for your theological positions? And
it wouldn't have any for me. None.
But you a second ago said that if life was proved to come from slime, from whatever, from an inanimate object, you wouldn't be able to accept that. But what if it did? How would your positions change, or how would you adapt if they don't?
I have answered you so many times, it's incredible, sir.
You keep turning to evolution as a creative process, and I'm never claiming it is.
If it renders God excessive and expendable, then it would shatter. I already answered that, right?
Yeah.
Are you waiting for him to answer that?
But I suppose because we essentially blended conversations here, so I sort of wonder where
we've answered it so many different angles.
He's answered it, so I'm wondering how you're going to answer.
And I did before that. I told you it would not change God's existence for me, because still it's a philosophical question of when the inanimate matter became animate, was there an intelligent mind, a living being behind that or not? And I told you that all of my observation is that life comes from life. It never comes from non-life.
So if it was proved that it came from non-life.
But how do you prove that? How do you prove scientifically that there is no intelligent mind behind the process? Sir, you see, that's not a scientific question. You cannot prove that scientifically. The same way I cannot scientifically prove that God exists, nobody can scientifically prove that God does not exist. Why? Because the question of God is not a scientific question.
These same questions that
you're in the
asking
wrong
now,
class.
These same questions you're asking now about how on earth I could prove that inanimate matter turned into matter and that explain the point of origin are exactly the same sort of questions that Christians gave to scientists who were looking into evolution as an explanatory process. I don't have the answers to that, but nor did they until they came across the fossil record. So I'm leaving room for the unknown here, but by the same token, you can't rule it out.
I never have.
You have.
I have never ruled out that scientists are going to be able to show how inanimate matter can become animate. Okay, I've never ruled that out. What I have said is, ultimately, I don't believe that life comes from non-life. I believe that life comes from life.
Okay, and if
that's a philosophical point. That's not a scientific point.
Like what you're making it a philosophical point. What I'm suggesting is, if it moved from a philosophical point to a scientific one, how would you adapt to that? That's what I'm wondering. By the same token, evolution was considered, as in how the creative process manifested, was also initially considered a philosophical point, and then it became a scientific one when the evidence built up.
Okay.
So that's why
I've answered you as best as I can, and here's my conclusion. If you tell me that 2 + 2 = 4 is a personal statement about relationships, I am forever going to disagree with you.
With respect, you opened with these questions, and I'd rather you answer the question rather.
Yeah, I am. I am answering you head up now. I'm telling you that if you show me that 2 + 2 = 4 is a personal relational issue, I'm going to disagree with you to my grave. I am convinced that 2 + 2 = 4 is a mathematical statement. It is not a statement about relationships. And obviously that's one of the things I've been pleading with you guys. Learn to distinguish between different forms of knowledge. I do not scientifically prove God exists. It's impossible. But the evidence of order and design, of a moral absolute, of the existence of love and meaning in life, points to the existence of God. That is not science. That is not math. That is philosophy. Now, if I have a kidney that is failing, I want the best scientist, the best doctor to take care of my failing kidney. That is not a relational issue. That is a physical, biological, medical issue. You've got to learn to distinguish between different areas of knowledge.
With respect, you're setting the different parameters of knowledge on your own, and those parameters have shifted and do shift. So my point is, a question that may initially have been philosophical becomes scientific. Nothing's fixed here. So by bringing up this, but that's not the point of opinion.
I will never accept the idea that 2 + 2 = 4 is a relational statement. It's a mathematical statement, not a relational statement.
Evolution used to be a relational statement until it became one of scientific nature. My point is parameters do change.
But
This isn't an opinion.
I think you're buying into scientism as a catch-all, and that supersedes history, the humanities, and everything else, which is what we see in this country today. I think it sounds like you're talking about science just exists in a vacuum. No, science doesn't exist. There's not such thing as science. There's only scientists. There's only scientists in terms of who come up with theories. Well, you keep talking, it sounds to me like you keep referencing to science as some ironclad study that proves everything.
Absolutely not.
It certainly doesn't. Well, you just talked about his point of view, and how his point of view is supposedly an ironclad point of view that's just covering over everything. It just sounds to me like that's what how you're referencing science right now.
The reason why is because I can't think of a single example where something that has shifted from a philosophical thing, a form of knowledge, to a mathematical one has then shifted back to philosophical. That's never ever happened. It's a one-way process. So that's not me thinking science is ironclad.
So?
But that's just...
All right, well, what do you think about Jesus Christ?
I don't want to go into it. You already covered this area.
All right, good. We had a good time talking. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Can I
You bet.
ask what answer were you looking for?
Well, I was curious, for example, a hypothetical answer you could have given would be that if evidence did come up that was sufficient to convince the scientific body that inanimate matter did generate animate matter, I was wondering whether or not you then have to regard that bit of rock as the origin of creation, or whatever thing that was, that inanimate object
Not
being
really,
life.
because then we can always argue God is what caused that to go.
Well, hold on. I would say, so that's an emotional and intellectual loaded question, and I like that you're asking it. I would say that, me personally, if it proves that there's no beginning and that we don't need a creator, then intellectually I would have to agree and say that there is no God. But I can ask you the same kind of thing. I would say, if Christianity was true, would you be a Christian?
Yeah, I assume I would. Yeah, I assume I would have to. Sure, but that's a lot. I mean, I don't know what that
You'd
means.
have to. I don't think you'd have to. Many people would say no. I ran into many people who would say, even if Christianity is true, I wouldn't be a Christian. And that shows there's emotion behind it, as opposed to it's a matter of intellect in our debate.
But Christianity is an abstract concept, whereas I'm talking about something.
It's not an abstract concept. It's not a philosophical principle. It's based off of history and whether or not the resurrection occurred or not. It's not an abstract concept.
Oh no, it's rooted in history. I'm not disputing the historical validity of.
But that was just my last question.
Of course,
we should probably get on.
Of course, sure.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Great questions, great points.
Right, I'm freezing my balls.